So we all like to think we're pretty good people, right? That we make ethical choices. But what really goes into those decisions? Is it age, education, your job? Well, we're about to dig into a study that suggests the answers are probably not what you think.
I mean, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The older you get, the wiser you become. And that wisdom should give you a stronger moral compass. We just assume that aging makes us more ethical. But is that really true?
To get some answers, we're going to look at this really fascinating study from 2011. They surveyed over 500 people in Thailand, specifically government employees and law students, to measure their business ethics. This gives us some awesome real-world data to see if our assumptions actually hold up.
All right, let's get into it. We're going to use this study as our guide to figure out what really makes people tick, ethically speaking. And we'll start with the unique cultural setting where all this research happened.
So, this study was done in Thailand, and that's a really important detail. Why? Because Thai culture is what you'd call highly collectivist. It's not so much about personal achievement like in many Western countries. Instead, the big focus is on group harmony, loyalty, and a we-first mentality.
And here's another key idea from the study. Power distance. Thailand scores really high on this one. Basically, it means that people are more accepting of hierarchy and authority. You show a ton of respect to your superiors, and that shapes everything, from how you act at work to the decisions you make. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
Okay, now for the really fun part. The researchers took all this data and used it to test some super common beliefs about what makes people ethical. Let's see if what we all think is true actually is.
Let's start with that big one we asked at the very beginning. Does living longer and having more life experiences actually make you a more moral person? So the study split people into two groups. You had the folks who were 25 and under, and then everyone 26 and older.
And check out these numbers. On their ethics scale, where higher is better, the younger group scored a 42.41, and the older group, 42.52. I mean, that difference is so tiny, it's practically nothing.
And there you have it.
The researchers found that age was not a statistically significant factor at all. So that idea that we just automatically get more ethical as the years go by, well, according to this data, that's a myth. Okay, so if age isn't the magic bullet, what about education? I mean, surely someone with a master's degree has a more sophisticated ethical compass than someone with just a bachelor's, right? Let's see what the numbers say. The average score for people with a bachelor's degree or less was 42.85. For those with a master's or higher, it was 43.00. Again, that is an incredibly small difference. So spending more years in a university classroom didn't really move the needle on ethics scores for this group. That's two of our biggest assumptions completely busted. What about leadership then? You'd think managers who have to deal with tough ethical calls all the time would be more ethically developed than people who aren't in management. Does that experience count for something? And the answer is a quick and simple no. Once again, no significant statistical difference. Managers and non-managers were basically neck and neck. It really seems like all our common ideas about what builds character just aren't matching the data. So if age, your level of education, and being a manager don't make a difference, then what in the world does? This is where things get really, really interesting. The researchers looked at a bunch of other things, and this is where a completely different story starts to emerge. First up on the list, gender. And whoa, look at this. Here we see a real difference. In the study, men had an average ethics score of 42.15. Women, though, scored 43.62. And unlike all those other comparisons, this gap was big enough to be statistically significant. So there we have it, our first big clue. For this specific group of people in Thailand, gender did seem to be a major factor, with women scoring noticeably higher on the ethics scale. But the biggest, most jaw-dropping finding came when they compared the two main groups they surveyed. Just look at this chart. The government employees had a pretty solid ethics score of 42.87, but the law students, they averaged just 34.09. This wasn't a small gap, it was a chasm. Yeah, to put that into perspective, the government employees scored nearly 25% higher on the ethics scale than the students who were on their way to becoming lawyers. That is a massive difference.
The researchers' own conclusion was pretty blunt. They said, and I'm quoting here, "Working for the government is a significant factor in the moral maturity of respondents. It suggests that actually being in the public sector had a huge impact on their ethical thinking."
All right, it's time to put all the pieces together. We've busted some pretty big myths, and now we have a much clearer picture of what the real influencers were in the study.
So here's the final scorecard. The things that didn't really matter were age, management experience, and whether you had a master's or a bachelor's. But what did matter? Gender, and having work experience in the government. And the researchers found one other fascinating little detail. Something else that made a significant difference was simply having taken one single ethics course in college. And that just leaves us with this one huge final thought. If a single class focused on ethics can have more of an impact than an entire master's degree or decades of life experience, it really forces us to ask a tough question. Are we even focusing on the right things when we try to build a more ethical society?